It started with a simple boarding pass and a polite smile. No one expected that within 12 minutes, the entire aircraft would be grounded, the pilot would be dismissed, and the most powerful man in the cabin would reveal who he truly was. Jalen had no intention of making a scene. He just wanted to get to New York on time. Wearing a charcoal hoodie, jeans, and spotless sneakers, he didn't exactly look like someone with a private equity firm under his belt and majority ownership in 3 global companies. But none of that mattered right now. His mother had always taught him to treat everyone with grace, no matter how much money sat in your account. So when he handed the gate agent his boarding pass for seat 2A, and she glanced him up and down like he'd mistakenly wandered into the wrong area, Jalen said nothing. He simply smiled and stepped aside when she pointed toward the economy boarding line. "There must be a mistake," he said calmly, showing her the app on his phone, clearly displaying first class, 2A. She gave a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm sorry, sir, but that seat's been reassigned. You'll need to take a seat back in row 34. Someone else is already seated there." "But I booked this seat days ago," Jalen said, eyebrows furrowing. "I checked in this morning. No one informed me." "Sir," she interrupted, voice sharp and now fully condescending, "I'm not going to argue with you. If you have a problem, take it up with customer service after the flight." The way she emphasized "sir" made it clear she didn't see him as someone who belonged in first class, or perhaps even on the plane at all. Other passengers began watching, a few whispering and snickering. A middle-aged man in a business suit walked by, patting Jalen lightly on the shoulder as he passed. "Better luck next time, bud," he said with a smirk. Jalen swallowed the anger rising in his chest and nodded. He didn't yell, didn't demand, didn't threaten. Instead, he quietly accepted the economy seat. 34B, middle seat, no legroom, next to a teenage boy playing loud music and a man who reeked of body spray. He sat there, scrolling through emails, not saying a word. But every moment he sat in that cramped seat, surrounded by disrespect and casual indifference, something shifted inside him. Then the pilot made his way down the aisle. Captain Reed was in his late 50s, white beard trimmed, his voice booming as he greeted passengers along the way. When he reached Jalen's row, he paused. "Everything good here, folks?" he said with a rehearsed smile. Jalen looked up. "Actually, Captain," he said politely, "there was a mistake with my seat. I was assigned 2A, but I was told it had been reassigned without notice." Captain Reed squinted, clearly sizing him up. "You sure about that?" he said, glancing at Jalen's hoodie. "They don't usually bump first-class passengers unless something's off." Jalen kept his tone calm. "Something's off, all right." The pilot shrugged. "I'll let the crew handle it. We've got a tight schedule." And he kept walking. That was the moment Jalen decided he wasn't going to let this one slide. He tapped open his contacts and called one of his executives, Leona Whitmore, COO of his holding company, who was just 15 minutes away from the airport. "Leona," he said quietly, "you're going to need to initiate Protocol Alpha and send the legal team notice of incident. I'm on flight 728. Ground it in 12 minutes. There was a short pause on the other end. "You sure?" she asked. "You want to escalate?" "Yes," he replied firmly. "It's time." He hung up. The flight crew had just finished welcoming the last group of passengers. The doors were about to be sealed when the gate agent's phone rang. She picked up, said a few words, and then froze mid-sentence. Her expression changed from annoyance to unease. She glanced around, eyes landing on Jalen. Moments later, the head stewardess approached him. "Mr. Miles?" she said, her voice suddenly softer. We were just informed there's been a serious error. Could you please come with me?" He stood up slowly, eyes locked on the pilot who was still in the cockpit. The murmurs began before he even reached the front. Some passengers were visibly confused. Others had gone silent. The stewardess led him not just to first class, but into the cockpit. The pilot looked up, his confusion quickly melting into discomfort. "Mr. Miles," the stewardess whispered, "Captain Reed would like to speak with you." "Actually," Jalen said, voice even, "I'll be speaking with him." Captain Reed stood, unsure of what was happening. "Listen," he began. "I don't know what this is about." Jalen cut him off. "You're relieved of duty, effective immediately." There was a tense silence. Then the stewardess's phone buzzed. She read the message and looked like she'd seen a ghost. "Captain Reed," she said slowly, "you're being replaced. By direct order from the board." The pilot looked stunned. "Board? What board?" Jalen turned toward him, finally pulling off the hoodie, revealing a branded collared shirt underneath. Embroidered on the chest, Skyjet Holdings, Executive Chairman. "I am the board," Jalen said, "and you're no longer flying for us." Gasps erupted in the cabin as passengers realized what was happening. Phones came out. Whispers filled the air. The same man who'd patted Jalen mockingly just minutes ago now looked like he wanted to disappear. But Jalen wasn't finished. He turned to the stewardess. "Lock the doors. No one's leaving yet. I have a message for this crew and everyone on board." He pulled out his phone again and started recording. And just when people thought they'd seen it all, Jalen shared something that would ripple through every media outlet within hours. Jalen held his phone steadily as he looked into the camera, recording a message he hadn't planned on delivering, but one that needed to be said. His voice was calm, measured, not angry, but deeply resolute. "To everyone watching," he began, "I boarded this plane expecting to fly like any other passenger. I booked first class. I paid the same as anyone else. But I was bumped, not for being late, not for safety, not for any valid reason. I was bumped because someone made a snap judgment based on how I look." He let the words hang in the air. "I didn't come here to embarrass anyone. But this is the 4th time in 6 months I've been asked to step aside or told my reservation was mysteriously changed. The difference is, this time, the airline belongs to me." Gasps and murmurs filled the cabin again. More phones came out, recording now from every angle. "I'm not doing this for attention. I'm doing it because every person who's ever been dismissed, downgraded, or treated like they don't belong needs to know, we see you. And things can change. Today, they are." He ended the video and handed the phone to the stewardess. "Forward that to our PR director. Tell him I want it published within the hour. No cuts, no edits. Let the world see the full clip." She nodded, still stunned, and walked quickly toward the front galley. Captain Reed remained frozen, jaw clenched as he tried to process what had just happened. "Mr. Miles, I've been flying for 32 years. This is outrageous. I didn't even know who you were." "That's exactly the problem," Jalen replied. "You didn't need to know. You should have treated me with professionalism regardless." "But I didn't do anything wrong," the pilot insisted. "I didn't deny you the seat. No, you just walked by when you saw the issue and chose to say nothing." "That's complicity," Jalen said flatly. "You represented this airline, and in front of nearly 200 people, you let discrimination slide without a word. That speaks to your judgment, and I don't trust your judgment with lives in your hands. Two security officers, alerted by Leona's team, boarded the plane and quietly escorted Captain Reed off. He didn't protest. He didn't argue. His eyes didn't meet anyone's as he left. Jalen returned to the aisle, eyes moving slowly over the silent passengers. "Now," he said, "this flight will be delayed by 40 minutes while we bring in a new pilot. Anyone who would prefer to reschedule will cover the full cost of your rebooking. But for those of you staying, thank you for your patience." He walked back to first class. The gate agent who had denied him earlier was gone, sent home, as confirmed by another call from Leona. But this wasn't about revenge. Jalen didn't feel triumphant. He felt heavy. In his seat now, 2A, where he belonged from the beginning, he leaned back and let out a slow breath. This wasn't how he wanted to spend the morning, but something about the way that gate agent had looked at him had brought back memories, harsh ones. He remembered being 17, working as a busboy in a downtown hotel restaurant. A guest had mistaken him for a thief and demanded security be called. The manager hadn't defended him. Instead, he'd asked Jalen to exit through the back to avoid a scene. Jalen had walked home that day in the rain, not angry, but determined. That determination had built a legacy. And now, sitting in first class on his own airline, he wasn't just representing himself. After 30 minutes, a new pilot boarded, Captain Olivia Chen, one of the highest-rated pilots in the company. She knocked gently on the bulkhead before entering the cockpit, then stopped to greet Jalen personally. "Mr. Miles," she said with a warm, genuine smile, "thank you for your leadership. I'm honored to complete this flight." "The honor's mine," Jalen replied. "Take us home safely." With boarding procedures complete and the new pilot confirmed, the plane began taxiing. As it lifted off the ground, Jalen looked out the window at the clouds. But he wasn't thinking about the sky. He was thinking about systems, policies, training. By the time they landed in New York, he'd drafted an entirely new corporate initiative in his mind. Once in the terminal, Jalen was met by his executive assistant and two directors from the airline. They walked swiftly beside him through the terminal, briefing him on the media fallout already taking shape. "The video's gone viral," his assistant said. "Over 4 million views in 3 hours. Hashtags are trending. Most comments are overwhelmingly supportive." "Good," Jalen replied. "Now we need to act, not just react. I want mandatory recertification for all flight and ground staff, implicit bias training, customer service overhaul, transparency in seat assignments. If they're not treating people right, they're not flying for us." The younger director hesitated. "That'll stir pushback from the unions." Jalen didn't blink. "Then we'll pay the cost. Better to lose dollars than dignity." As they reached the black SUV waiting for them outside, a young man approached hesitantly. "Excuse me," he said, holding out his phone nervously. "Are you the guy from the video?" Jalen smiled. "Yeah, that's me." The young man nodded, his voice cracking just a little. "Thank you. I've been told I don't belong more times than I can count. Seeing you stand up like that, it meant something." Jalen placed a hand on the young man's shoulder. "You do belong. Don't let anyone tell you different." He got into the car, closed the door, and pulled out his tablet. Emails were flooding in. Supporters, media outlets, even a few competitors pretending to be concerned colleagues. But one subject line stood out, from the chair of the National Airline Consortium. He opened it. "Mr. Miles, we'd like to invite you to speak at our annual summit next month on ethics and leadership." Your recent actions have started an industry-wide conversation. Jalen smirked. About time. But back at corporate headquarters, Leona had just received an anonymous message on the internal whistleblower line. A video. Surveillance footage from a different flight. One that had happened last month. A different crew. But the same problem. And the man who appeared to mistreat an elderly black woman was still employed. She picked up the phone and called Jalen immediately. Jay, we've got another problem, and this one's worse. Jalen sat in the back seat of the SUV, still absorbing the emotional encounter with the young man at the terminal, when his phone buzzed. Leona's name lit up the screen. He answered immediately. We've got another problem, she said. Security footage just came in from a different flight. Dated last month. Different crew, same airline. One of our senior flight supervisors is seen disrespecting and forcibly moving an elderly black woman to the back row, even though she had a confirmed seat in business class. It looks bad. Jay, really bad. Jalen's chest tightened. Send it to me, he said. Seconds later, the video file popped up. He watched as the supervisor, Dennis Kroll, a name he vaguely remembered from an older hiring report, berated the woman. She looked confused, soft-spoken, unsure of why she was being forced to switch seats. There was no confrontation, no foul language, just cold, dismissive treatment. The footage ended with her being escorted to the rear of the plane by 2 flight attendants. No one had intervened. Jalen forwarded the video to legal, HR, and media relations with a single-line instruction. Full investigation. Immediate suspension. I want names, timelines, and policy failures by 5 p.m. Then he called Leona again. I want an emergency meeting tonight. Every regional manager, every department head, and legal on standby. This is no longer isolated. This is systemic. You got it, she said. By the time Jalen stepped into his Manhattan office, the walls already buzzed with tension. Everyone knew something had changed. The viral video had made headlines across every major news outlet. More stories were surfacing. Passengers sharing their own experiences, tagging the airline, tagging him. Some had dates, some had receipts, some had photos. This wasn't just a public relations crisis. This was a reckoning. At 7 p.m., Jalen stood in the executive boardroom in front of a dozen monitors, each filled with the face of a department head or regional manager across time zones. He didn't waste time. We built Skyjet to compete with legacy carriers, to offer modern service, sleek comfort, and leadership that reflects the world we actually live in. But that means nothing if we're carrying the same rot in our culture as the ones we set out to disrupt. He paused, scanning the faces on the screen. I was bumped from my seat yesterday, not because of a technical error. I was bumped because someone judged that I didn't look like I belonged. And they assumed they could get away with it. That's not just a customer experience issue. That's a reflection of how deeply we've failed to train, vet, and hold our staff accountable. He clicked the remote, playing the video of the elderly woman being mistreated. Gasps and murmurs filled the room. This was last month, he continued. Unreported. Buried. And if not for an anonymous whistleblower, we never would have seen it. So here's what's going to happen. Effective immediately, we are freezing all hiring, retraining every employee from gate agent to executive, and launching an external audit into internal culture and passenger complaints. The compliance director tried to interject. Jalen, if we go that hard that fast, we'll be opening ourselves to lawsuits. Public admissions of systemic issues are a liability. The real liability, Jalen cut in, Is letting this cancer keep growing until someone gets hurt? Or worse? I'd rather get sued for cleaning house than for covering up a pattern. There was silence on the call, but no one argued. That night, Jalen worked until nearly midnight with Leona and the HR team, combing through past complaints. Most had been dismissed by middle management, written off as miscommunication or passenger overreaction. But one file stood out. A handwritten letter from a woman named Bernice Langston, 83 years old. The same woman from the video. She had mailed it directly to the corporate office a week after the incident. The envelope had been marked non-urgent and tossed into a general inbox. Jalen read the letter aloud. I'm not asking for money. I'm not asking for a free flight. I just want someone to explain why I was made to feel so small that day. I raised 4 children, worked my whole life, and finally bought myself a business class ticket for my birthday. I was so proud, but I left that flight feeling like I didn't belong in the world anymore. That's all. No curse words, no demands, just quiet heartbreak. Jalen swallowed hard. Get me her address. 2 days later, he stood on the front porch of a small brick home in North Carolina, holding a bouquet and a handwritten apology. Bernice answered the door slowly, unsure at first who he was. Then her eyes widened. I remember you, she said. You're the man from the video. I'm also the man who owes you an apology, he replied, handing her the flowers. May I come in? They sat in her cozy living room, photos of grandchildren lining the mantel. Jalen listened as she told him about her life, her husband who'd passed, her years working in the school cafeteria, her joy in finally being able to afford something she'd dreamed of. I wasn't trying to stir trouble, she said. I just didn't want to leave this earth without knowing someone cared. Jalen blinked back the tightness in his throat. You changed everything, he said. Not just for me, for everyone who flies with us from now on. He offered her a lifetime first-class pass, not as charity, but as recognition. But Bernice said no. I don't need free flights, she said. Just do better. That's all I ever wanted. Back at headquarters, Jalen launched the Langston Standard, a new ethical framework for every employee at Skyjet. Every complaint had to be logged, reviewed within 72 hours, and signed off by a senior executive. All flights would carry a rotating ethics officer to observe and report. More importantly, Jalen rolled out a new slogan company-wide: Every seat counts, every soul matters. Months later, at the National Airline Consortium Summit, Jalen stood on stage in front of the industry's most powerful executives. He told them everything about how he'd been judged, how he'd stayed silent for years, how silence had only allowed it to fester. He played the video of Bernice again, not the one from the plane, but a new one. One where she laughed, holding a mug that read, I belong here. The room gave a standing ovation. Back at the airport, a new employee named Raquel, the same age Jalen had been when he was a busboy, stood proudly at the gate in her Skyjet blazer. She watched as a young man in a hoodie approached with a first-class ticket. Other passengers stared, unsure. Raquel smiled and stepped forward. Good afternoon, sir. First class to San Francisco? Right this way. Let me know if you need anything. The man smiled. Thanks. That means a lot. She didn't know his name. Didn't need to. Because now Skyjet had a culture that didn't care what you looked like, only that you deserved to be treated with respect. And Jalen Miles had made sure of it.